Hello crafty people, it's Sharon here, and today I've got a little colouring project for you which I hope you all like. I recently posted an Easter card featuring this image on my social media, and I got some questions asking how I'd made it and things like that, so I thought I would just do a colouring video to show you how to colour the character. This character is actually a digi-stamp and it comes from Polkadoodles. It's a set called Easter Gnomes. You can buy images individually or you can buy a complete set which has got coloured and black and white gnomes and various other things. So you can buy whatever you like from there really. So I have printed my image onto some cardstock which is smooth and suitable for alcohol pens. I've gone for as thin as I could get away with because my printer won't take heavy card, but the real trick with this is you need to really give your ink overnight to dry, your printer ink, to avoid smudging. So I actually printed these yesterday and now I'm ready to go ahead and colour. I'm using my Ohuhu Honolulu pens today, and I'm using the Honolulu version 2 set, and the reason for that is because I've got a brush nib and a fine nib on these, which means I can get into the little details as well without too much worry, but I can also cover a big area. So I'm going to start with some purples because my gnome was wearing purple, and the colours I have gone for are VO30, VO50 and VO60, and those colours are just 3 shades of purple. So if you don't have those, it really doesn't matter at all, but that's what I chose, or you could go for something completely different. Now, as I often do when I'm starting on a big image, just to get you going and to take away some of that fear, I always start on a smallish area just to see how the pens are going down. So I'm going to start with my lightest colour, and there's his little tunic, there's a little corner just here which I'm going to just test out with my pens. So I'm going to put my lightest colour in, and although it's light, it's not super light, but light enough, and sometimes I might pick out my narrow pen. So I've just picked up my pointed end. I opened it by mistake, but it works pretty well in this small area, and I think I'll follow on with my dark colour in the same way. So I've just added some medium colour and then dark, and making sure I leave my highlight in the middle. There we are. And then I'm just going to go back, probably with my small end of the pen, just to blend that in. So quite quickly I've got a little test area there. I'm now going to go onto another area, which is this bit down here, and follow the same process. So I'll explain it in more detail as we go along, because we're going to repeat this a few times really. So first of all, a good coat of colouring with my palest colour, and then onto my mid colour, thinking where do I want my shade to be, and I think his tunic is sort of coming round from the back like so. So this would be a lighter area, and under his beard would be a darker area as well. So that's that. And again, remember, as I always say, you don't have to be precise. You know, there's no prizes for this. You just basically want to have some fun. And I'm going in with my darkest colour, adding the tiniest amount now, just to give some depth there. And for that I chose my small end of my pen. My reason for doing that is just because I'm not good at doing these lightweight kind of situations. I am a bit heavy-handed, so for me that small nib is helpful in those smaller areas. And meanwhile I've gone back to my medium and just touched on the edge of the dark and blended, and then I'm going to just bring in my light colour. And I've not coloured all the way, we'll see how that looks, but what happens is you can get a slightly darker colour if you put 2 layers of the same colour. So that's what I've done here. And now let's move on. we'll go to his sleeve. And I've just zoomed in a little bit closer, so I think I can get away with it, so that you can see more closely what I'm doing. Again, filling in the area with my lightest colour. And then I'm going to come in with my medium colour, and here the sleeve is sweeping around from back to front like this, so the lightest area is probably going to be in the middle here. So I'm going to bring down my colour from top to bottom, and as you can see I am just swapping between the different pen nibs just to whatever suits me. I'm putting a little bit of shadow there where his sleeve is. Sorry, not his sleeve, his moustache. Then I'm coming in with my darkest colour, and I'm doing the same thing but not going quite as far. And I'm just doing little flicks. Back to my medium colour just to blend out what I've just applied. And hopefully that blending process will have already started because I laid down my nice wet colour. And then I'm coming back with my palest colour and just adding some more flicks and just trying to leave the tiniest amount of pale area in the middle with just one layer, just to give that extra depth. Right, we are ready to carry on. I'm going to just deal with the egg. I think I want to have some purple stripes in the middle. As you can see, I've already laid down some yellow, which I meant to do on test paper, but I did it on there by mistake. But no worries, because that is the yellow that I want, so handy. I am going to just give my little decorative band on my egg a little coating. And what I'm doing is I'm using purples and yellows. I'm trying to stick to a fairly restricted colour palette. So you'll see that I use the same yellows on the bees and the centre of the flower, that kind of thing, and the chicks. And my purple I've used on my tunic and my egg, just to you know, not get overwhelmed with too many colours. And now I'm bringing in my darker colour from the side, because the egg is oval, so this central area is going to be the lightest area where the light catches. So we don't have to get too precise about it, but that's how I tend to deal with oval items. And then I'm going in with my darkest colour where his hands are, just to blend out and get that sense of depth. Back to my medium. Sorry, that's my light one by mistake. Here's my medium, and I'm just doing gentle flicks from the darkest area through to the lightest, just to pull out and blend that colour a little bit more. And then finally with my pale colour, flicking from medium to light once again, and just trying to leave an area with one layer in the middle if I can. And then we'll go on to this bottom layer here and do the exact same thing. Onto the medium, and if you look above you can see that where I've left the ink for a while, it does start to blend of its own accord. So a useful tip, and this is something I do find really hard, is to when you come to a point, just leave it alone, leave it to settle and see what it does. Because if you keep blending over and over and over and over again, what happens is you just bleach out your colours, and you end up with not much variation. So it is worth just leaving your colours to sit for a minute or two. You can always go back to them and reactivate by adding more alcohol ink on the top from your existing pens. So it's not like they're ever going to dry up and you get to the point where you can't work them anymore. You always have got that option to go back and just reactivate it. So there's our egg, and now I think we'll move on to our nemesis, which is the giant hat. And when you have something really big, what I do try to do is break it down into sections. And that's for two reasons. One is it's less intimidating overall. And number two is because we're wanting to work on partially wet card to get a good blend, we don't want to colour in too big of an area at once because that alcohol ink will dry out quite quickly. So in my mind, I'm dividing my hat into sections, and the first section is sort of this rim here, and I'm just being careful going up to the edges because there will be a very slight bleed, so I don't want to go too close to what will be the white area and the pink area of his nose. And then I'm going to go back in with my medium and think about getting some light and shade again. Now I am going to just outline around his moustache because it's maybe a little bit of a shadow there. And my light area is sort of naturally coming here in the middle. And my darkest area I'm going to just keep for the very edges of that shape. There we go. Back to my medium, just to draw that out a bit, and trying very hard to conserve that light area in the middle. There we go. And for my next area, I'm going to go for the next sort of crease on his hat. So I'm going to pick up where I left off. And this is where these brush pens come in handy because you can just cover a large area relatively quickly. Onto my medium, and this probably is a bit more simple in terms of colouring, thinking about light and shade, because what we're trying to do is just make the hat appear round like this, so the light area is sort of going up this area in the middle, but the crease there will have caused a little bit of a shade as well, so I'm just adding that in. And then onto my dark colour, and I'm going to go where that crease is. So once you get going on these large areas, you sort of have a formula, if you like, and you're just following that through, repeat, repeat, repeat. So I've gone back to my medium, and then finally my light area, and I'm not going to go all the way. I'm trying to leave the very lightest bit somewhere in the middle there. Now this next segment, so off we go again. I'm going to draw an imaginary line there where that crease sort of disappears. And really this is the biggest area of this image, so you know, once you pass this area you've really completed a lot and broken the back of it, if that's a good way to call it. So again, I'm coming in from the side. I haven't got a crease this time, so I probably will just leave that and let it blend naturally. And I'm trying to, when I'm doing my blending, I'm trying not to leave a straight edge on the edge of my blend. And that all helps it to merge together a bit more easily. If you've got a solid line, it's very hard to make that disappear. So actually I'm almost scribbling. This is what I like about hats and things. You can just sort of scribble to give that sort of feeling of fabric. There we go. So back to my palest colour. And as it turns out, my light area of light didn't come out in exactly the same place, but you know, I don't mind because it looks more natural that way. It's not sort of a perfect straight line. And now all of a sudden we've done all of this and we're just left with the remainder of the hat. So let's go in there and get that coat down. Whilst we're doing that, we can think about what area we're going to cover next. And you know, my usual trick with this, just turn that paper around to make the colouring process comfortable for you, and that way you will get a much better flow and a better result. So I'm going to edge around this flower. My flower petals are going to be white, so I do need to be careful with that. I've got a little crease there, so I need to cast a shadow, and then where his hat's coming down, I'm just going to cast that shadow again. In with the dark. And again, I'm just doing sort of flicking motions to try to prevent a solid dark line appearing. And then I'm just drawing that out a little bit more. And finally onto my lightest colour, just for those finishing touches. I happen to have opened it with the fine nib, and you know what, that's just fine for this last little bit. There we go. So his costume is pretty much done. Get my purples out of the way for a bit. I think before we lose track of them, I might just do his nose and hands, which are skin colours, and I have chosen, they're in the brown range, EO10 and EO90, and the idea of that is they're a bit more peachy and a bit less pinky than if you went for some of the other colours, but sometimes you can find really good flesh tones in the kind of yellow area as well. So, you know, have a look around on your swatches and just see what suits you. This is going to be quite quick to do, so I am colouring his two hands and his nose at the same time. And the good thing about doing this is that I can make sure that I don't accidentally colour over them if I get a bit carried away. So now going on to my darker colour, which is EO90. And if this doesn't give enough contrast for you, of course you can go ahead and pick something a little bit darker. But what I'm doing is I'm just edging. So on this hand I made a sort of C shape. Didn't quite go to the edge, but I'm not worried about that. I'm happy with that. And I'm going to just blend out. And these areas here, I don't know if I even want to blend them. I kind of want to get that contrast. I'm going to give it a few seconds just to set for a moment, and then I'm going to go back with my dark. This time I've got my narrow pen nib, and I'm just going in to add a little bit more depth. And that will just add a little bit more delicate shade. So another scary thing is a face and hands, but with these gnomes you've hardly got any face and hands, so it's a really nice thing to do. Let's move on to his beard and moustache. And for this I think brush tips are an essential. And the reason for this is because you can flick and you can get a nice flow for anything that's hair or whiskers or anything like that. So him being a gnome, I'm choosing shades of grey, and my palest grey, which I'm going to lay down first, is, oh, can you see it, CG Roman numeral 200. I don't know how you're supposed to say that, so I hope that makes sense. And I'm just starting with his moustache. It sort of comes from the middle there and comes out, and I'm flicking. And for me, flicking away seems to have a more random effect or organic effect. And that's with this kind of thing, it is essential to be able to move your paper around. So I'm holding the pen fairly far away, placing it from the start, and then just allowing it to flick roughly in the direction of the hair. And with this, I want to keep these streaks. I don't want a smooth blend, so I'm going to let that dry for a second, and I'm going to carry on with my beard. And again, I'm starting from the top of his beard, and I'm kind of following, not exactly, but roughly, the guidelines provided by the little extra lines that you see here. And I'm going to turn around and flick from the bottom as well, and hopefully that will leave some area of white in the middle. I then have a medium colour, which is CG2, and I'm going to repeat the process, but I'm not going to put quite so many flicks in. Now this area here, it kind of looks like the egg will cast a shadow, but if I do that, that's going to end up very heavy. So I'm just going to ignore that and just put a few flicks in like this, and ignore the fact that the shadow would be there for now, because otherwise it just will end up too heavy. And then coming around, let's start our flicking process once again. And I'm not going so far this time. I may take it too far. I do have a bit of a habit of that. Going down to the bottom, a few more flicks. Might just drag one or two of them down a little bit. Drag that one up a little bit. And then onto his beard. Now the way that you flick will be entirely dependent on you. I find it easier to go from this way round, from the edge, and flick away. Some people find it easier to flick towards them, so just take a piece of you know, spare card and just try it and see what feels comfortable for you. And don't worry about making something perfect, because we're just giving an impression really. So that's that one. And then I have got a much darker colour, which is CG Roman numeral 204. And I just need to use the tiniest amount of this really, because I want to give the impression that this is sort of a greyish white colour. So trying not to get too carried away. If you do, it doesn't matter, it just means he has a darker grey beard. It's not the end of the world. There we go. Repeating the exact same process. And what I might do is, just to soften that down, is just go over, and I'm flicking towards me this time for a bit more control, because I want to go actually over that grey, which will just allow it to fade out a little bit. And there we have his beard. Now we're going to move on to the shoes, as we happen to have these colours here, and I'm going to, like I said, try not to overdo it with the amount of colours I'm using. I'm going to use the exact same colours. So I'm going to start with my pale colour and colour the shoes all over, and this will eventually provide the highlight. Doing both at the same time because they're relatively small. And then I'm going to outline them with my medium colour and try and leave a light round circle in the middle, which is the highlight, and then some sort of highlight here. And then over to my darkest colour, and I'm going to do the same thing again, but not go so far. I'm trying to keep it sort of round, because his boot has a round shape. And this one I'm just going to flick in from the sides. Back to my medium to blend out. This one is a circular shape. And I'll probably leave his boots at that. And now I need to just look at my bees, and I've got to decide where the stripes are going to go. I feel like their faces should be yellow so that they're bright. I don't want them to be sort of hidden and dull. So with that in mind and using my fine nibs, I'm going to colour the first stripe and the stinger of the tail with my grey. And then again, this is very, very quick. So I'm going to do both of them at the same time. And this time, rather than going light, medium, dark, because we've got such a small amount of space, I'm just going to go straight to my dark, bring that in. Then my medium with my fine nib. And just touch that in too. Now I do feel like I might need to go a little bit darker with my bees, so I'm just going to have a look for a darker grey. And what I've come up with is CG070, which is a sort of a shade darker again, and I'm just going to bring that in just to give that darker impression. And then I'm going to go back with what was my darkest colour and is now sort of a medium-ish colour, and just bring that in. And you can see that that's darkened those bees down a little bit, which is nice. And I'm going to skip what was my medium colour and just go back to my lightest to preserve that highlight there. And our bees are done. So now we're going to move on to the yellowish areas. And so starting perhaps with our bees, shall we? I'm going to use a very pale yellow, which is Y040. And again, this time using my fine tip, I am going to give them a little colour all over. Now when you've got a very, very pale colour like this one, you do just need to be a bit aware that you might get a little bit of ink movement from your print. So just be careful as you're colouring along. I have a really dark one, which is Y180. I'm going to do the same process again. So I'm going to flick from top and bottom. On my bee's face, I'm going to kind of just make a shape that matches his face. And I've got another yellow here which I'm going to blend away with. This one is Y070. What I'm trying to do is just soften that out a little bit. And going back to my palest yellow, going all over it again. Now I feel like that darkest yellow was a little bit harsh on the face, so I'm going with a slightly lighter colour just to soften that down. And just blend out a little bit. And I'm going to leave those to settle for a while. Let's do the flower, because I forgot about that. So I'm going to go with I have a yellow centre, so in with my pale yellow. And I'm going to skip my darkest colour and go with like the third colour. So that is Y140 Nugget. I'm going to do a line all around the edge, because again we imagine that this flower is kind of dome shaped, so on the edges will be the darkest areas. Y070, going to repeat the process, but I'm going to come in a little bit smaller and make a little shadow at the edge there with my medium. And then with my pale, I'm just going to fill in that centre. And when that dries, you should see the colour variation coming in there. My egg, I am going to colour with my pale colour first. And we're just going to give this a recoat just to reactivate this area. And then I'm going to go with Y140. And again, I'm drawing around the edge, creating that sort of oval shape. And on this bit, I'm coming in from the edges. And then I'm going to go with my medium and I'm bringing that oval shape in a bit more at the top there and bringing something in from the sides on that middle band, and then back to my pale just to fill in that middle area. And I'm going to leave that and see how that settles. If I feel like there's not enough contrast, I have got a darker Y180 pen which I used on my bees, but I did feel that was a bit much, so I might just skip that and stick with these. But let's carry on, leave these other bits to dry and see what we're left with. So I'm following the same process on the bottom of my egg. Going with my darker colour, I'm going to complete that oval shape at the base. And literally I am just drawing a line around for that. My mid colour coming in a bit more. And back to my light colour to complete that circuit. There we go. Now, before I forget, we will come back to the yellow in a moment, but I do need to just put some flicks in my petals to give the impression of shadow on them. These are white, but if I leave them completely white, they'll just look flat. So I'm going back to my greys that I've used in the beard and starting with my palest colour, and from the centre of my flower, I'm just going to make some little flicks out in the direction that my petal is unfolding. Like that. And then go into my mid colour, which was CG2. Same thing, not quite going as far. And I'm flicking from the centre in an outward direction. I may just add a little bit of shadow on the inside of that flower edge just to give that feeling of depth, and I'm just going to go over that. There we go. So I added a little bit of my grey just to really accentuate the sort of concave nature of that flower. Okay, meanwhile my egg has dried out a bit, and actually I think I've got enough depth of colour there with those three colours that I used, so I don't feel like I need to go any further with depth on those. I do want to add something in this little band here, so I'm going to go for something a little bit different, and I'm going to go for a pale blue, almost an aqua blue. And the reason I'm choosing this is because I also want to put a little bit of pale blue on the wings of my birds. So, not my birds, my bees even. I am going to pick out BG3 and BG4 on my swatch card, which is these two there, because I've got a very pale colour suitable for my wings and a slightly darker colour which will be good for the edge of my egg. These are tiny little bits, so don't need too much detail. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab those, And now I'm ready to go. So my BG3, this is where the fine nibs again come in handy when if you've got these Honolulu B pens. I can just go in and deal with those small areas, and then picking out my BG4, I'm going to just come in from the side and if I want to add some shadow for that, I can go back to my greys, so I've got my CG2 here, just bring that in from the side just to give that feeling of shadow, because my blue on its own wasn't quite enough. And that will be just enough for that tiny little bit of detail. I'm then going to go up to my bees and just give their wings a little colour. You could add some sparkle on there if you wanted to. Yeah. And I think I might get the BG4, which was the slightly darker one, and add a few flicks on my flower just to draw it together with my little band on my egg. So it's just an extra little tip or a little touch, shall we say, that's just helping to draw those colours together. There we are. So now we have our little chicks to deal with. We're going to use the same yellows that we used already, and I've picked out an orange just to quickly do their beaks. So I have chosen Y10. So I'm just going to put those in before we start, because that's very easy to do. And then we're going to begin the process to colour the chicks. So once again, I'm going to take one chick at a time. I'm going to just give him a good coat of colour. And I think I'm going to just do the whole chick because he's not too big. Just being mindful of the fact that this is a pale colour. I don't want to get a dirty look, so I'm just trying to go around the edges of my dark lines and let the ink sort of naturally bleed into it. I'm going to go with my darker colour next, and I'm just going to add some shade by drawing lines like this. I'm keeping it very simple. There we go. And onto my mid colour, and I'm just going to accentuate that, come in a little bit more. Leave his belly and the main characteristics of his face as pale as possible, because we always want the light to shine on the faces of our characters. That's kind of what brings them to life. Once you've got some alcohol ink down, usually that seals the ink on these if there is any sort of chance of smudging, so it will gradually it will stop it from smudging. I'm going to go back in and just add that dark colour back and do a second round to get a softer layer. So because we're adding more ink, more wetness, this should blend even better. And then back with my light. And then I'm going to repeat the process with chicken number 2. Using my dark. And that just about completes our process. So I'm just doing this final little bit of colouring, and then you'll see we've completed our chicks. So this has all been in real time, and you've seen me doing it in the same way that you would do it at home. I haven't sped any of it up. So this is quite a big image, and we've managed to get everything completed relatively quickly using a fairly limited amount of pens. So I hope you enjoyed that little colouring tutorial. If you like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe to me. Maybe leave me a note to let me know what you'd like to see next. Meanwhile, I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Bye bye.